But so they obviously failed because they killed him. His wife, by the way, was Nefertiti. If you've ever seen the bust of her head, which I have a copy on my desk at home, which is kind of cool. It's just a little one, but bought it at the museum there. And it even has fallen off of the shelf during earthquakes, but it's okay. It doesn't look busted up at all, even though the original does. So that's kind of interesting. So there's several interesting studies. Ziggy Freud did Sigmund Freud did a series of studies on Moses, arguing that Moses was the first monotheist, maybe as a priest. So his thinking is that Moses might have been a high priest for Akhenaten, and when they killed Akhenaten, the monotheists that were left fled, and that would have been Moses leading the Hebrews out of Egypt. So that's kind of interesting. Another author that talks about the same thing is Jan Assmann. Moses.
So were King Ramses mostly fictional?
No, obviously they don't know which.
Which Ramses?
Yeah, and in fact, Ra-Moses is the Egyptian for Ramesses, and Ra-Moses means out of Ra, right? And so if you think Moses, Moshe, means out of, they refer to him as out of what? Out of the basket, out of the river, out of Egypt, so there's a theme there. But Moses the Egyptian. So is this the source really initially of Western monotheism? I also would argue that mathematics has a lot to do with it. If you're a pagan and you worship this god here and that one there and that one there, there's obviously going to be conflicts between them, same kind that Socrates discovered between Euthyphro's conceptions of the pious, right? There are obviously conflicts when you have multiplicity of values and they're all in conflict. But if you're a mathematician, you realize that there can only be one right answer to a problem. And so in a sense, for those that have developed a mathematical basis, you could end up with those individuals, which would be the priesthood, arguing that there could only be one highest God. You can't have 5 highest gods. That doesn't work, right? So the conception of a monotheist as one highest, and then eventually, even in Judaism, you end up with the removal of all the other concepts as conflicting gods, and you end up with just one God. There's a book called The Face of God. It's not just the shoot. It's not that one though. There are obviously lots of those, but the one I'm thinking of talks about how the face of God goes from being one that you could actually see and talk to, as Abraham does, to a burning bush, where you ought not look. In fact, Moses does and gets burned as a result. But you eventually get to the point where God is a vacant seat. So there's a place, but no image. And of course, then you can't construct an image or an idol of God, because God is totally abstract, right? And so you end up with the face of God basically vanishing and becoming less and less specific, right? And that happens in the Jewish religion as well. But then, of course, we end up with Jesus. And Jesus ends up being a reformer, one way or another. And exactly what he stands for, we'll have to look at next week when we talk about Augustine and the development of the orthodoxy, or the correct belief of what Jesus is and what he stands for. So we'll do that next week, if that's okay with everyone. Any questions? Are we having fun?
So question 2 was, what is it?
What do you think religion is? The first one was, what do you think of the golden ratio?
I just want to confirm, because you said, you asked us if you should make that question.
Well, it's a democracy. If you don't want it to be, you can always say, no, I want this to be the question. How many ships did Columbus use the first voyage he made?
Did you get sucked into believing in Santa Claus?
Of course I believe in Santa Claus.
Still believe in Santa Claus?
Why, sure. I don't think he's a guy in a red suit. Actually, I've
He's
been,
real though,
I,
isn't he?
well,
Like,
I
well,
mean,
the concept is Saint Nicholas.
watch this. I'll show you. This is how well I believe in Santa Claus.
Start something new.
Oh, I need the other one. I've got two sets, so that's annoying. So which set is it in? Sometimes I can't remember. But you might get a kick out of this.
Oh, yeah. Chico.
Do you want to sit down?
We have
You want to sit down left? Tell them what you want for Christmas? Okay, come on. Sit down.
Mom can actually hold that. It's
She's been at my accent.
Say hi.
Tell me what kind